Hello there. I just wanted to make a quick video. I won't keep you for long, half hour or so. I guess about this topic of World War II, Adolf Hitler and the Freemasons and whether or not he was against the banks or with the banks or whatever. But when you look at the evidence, you realize that it was basically a case of a Sith Lord betrayed by bigger Sith Lords. And the thing that bothers me is you get a lot of people who have some kind of love affair with old mean Mr. Mustache here, thinking he was actually a Christian and that he was trying to save us from the banks. It's not true. They believe it, but that doesn't make it true. Now, I'll get into some things here and I'll cite some citations here, but basically I'll just read this off. Okay. There's so much propaganda out there these days trying to paint Hitler out to be some kind of good guy, saving us against the Freemason banking cartels. The truth of the matter is Hitler was either a 33rd or the Jesuit equivalent of. Now, this lie that he was some kind of good guy Christian was started by the Nazi-funded film The Greatest Lie Ever Told, which was one of the greatest lies ever told. Hitler was an occultist and a Freemason, the Thule Society, the Ahnenerbe Society, the Vrill Society. Also, try Google something called the Nazi Black Sun crematorium rituals. Freemason baptisms and child sacrifices that used to be performed there. Furthermore, he supposedly had the Spear of Destiny, the spear that punctured Christ on the cross, and apparently he used to stare at it and meditate on it for hours on end, trying to summon Lucifer. Keep in mind, these guys are insane. They think Lucifer and Jesus are the same being or brothers or whatever. They're occultists. You know, these Freemason occultists are really good at pretending to be Christian. Not to mention the fact that he was a huge meth head, amphetamine addict. But Hitler was simply a Sith Lord who was betrayed by the rest of the Sith Lords because he tried to take over the Empire. Case closed. But because of this one film and some people's hatred of all things Jewish, they just have this love affair with Hitler. They just love him. Mean Mr. Mustache. Here he is, I guess a picture of him in Antarctica or whatever. And that's another topic altogether. The deep underground military bases and the pyramids and the things that the Nazis found in Antarctica. They started back engineering what people today call fallen angel tech. But this is a good citation for a lot of this.
I finally understand how someone like Adolf Hitler managed to fool the overwhelmingly Christian nation of Germany into believing that he was doing God's work. I now know that Adolf Hitler was a large part of an agenda that is so massive that it can't be fully described here. You had better care about this plan instead of sports or soap operas, because what happened to Germany during the Nazi era is happening to America and the West today. It is a fact that much of the European nobility goes back to various houses, especially in England and France, which link the lines of the kings of England and the kings of Jerusalem. Fiction occurs when this link is used to create a mythology which states that the British people, led by their monarch, are one of the lost tribes of Israel. British Israel Freemasons also believe that since America was descendant from Britain, Americans who are of British Masonic descent are also one of the lost tribes of Israel. On the back of the US $1 bill, there exists a Star of David, hidden in plain sight. The British royal family is more German than it is English. Queen Victoria was married to Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. Under pressure from anti-German sentiment created during World War I, King George V changed his family name to Windsor. When Princess Elizabeth wanted to marry Prince Philip of the House of Schleswig-Holstein-Sonderburg-Glücksburg, she faced the same problem that King George did. Prince Philip renounced his titles and adopted the surname of Mountbatten. All four of Prince Philip's sisters married into the German nobility, which embraced Nazi philosophy. World War I ended according to the master plan of the 20th century Illuminati financiers. They knew that communism could only continue so long as capitalism supported it. The financiers also knew that the oppressive chains of the Treaty of Versailles would be broken by a leader who would eventually rise up from within Germany. Welcome to the first round of Problem, Reaction, and Solution. Following World War I, the League of Nations was the first popular attempt at creating a world government. The League was promoted as the way of providing a collective security, since an attack on any one member of the League would be considered an attack on all. The League failed as an organization, but acted as a successful stepping stone for the globalists. The League of Nations allowed the international bankers like J.D. Rockefeller to give more loans to more nations, provided the international bankers controlled the banking system of that nation. When the Bank for International Settlements was established in 1930, the Illuminati financiers gained more control of the world's money supply. This was all the more reason to start World War II. We must understand political Zionism up to World War I if we are to understand the entire foundation of the 20th century. Austrian Jew Theodor Herzl published a book in 1896 entitled The Jewish State. It proposed a Jewish state to cure the problem of anti-Semitism. The Rothschilds founded the Zionist Federation of Great Britain in 1897 to promote political Zionism with Theodor Herzl as president. We must stop our survey of political Zionism at this point to carefully define it. Political Zionism is the social movement which creates and sustains the physical nation of Israel. This definition is in the present tense because the territory of Israel is in a state of flux. Political Zionism is also the driver for world government through Israel in the tradition of the heretical Frankist Jews. This definition is embodied by the Rothschild family. Not all Jews are political Zionists. Not all political Zionists are Jews. The political Zionist movement feeds off Jews in the same way that the Nazi movement fed off Germans. Political Zionism is the greatest enemy of the Jews. Political Zionism is the ultimate dialectic, and Theodor Herzl understood this. Frankism is the basis of political Zionism, which expressed itself in the Russian Revolution. Karl Marx's real name was Moses Mordecai Levy. Vladimir Lenin was born Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov, which is of Jewish lineage. Leon Trotsky's real name was Lev Davidovich Bronstein. The Rothschilds finally succeeded in making good on the threat to remove the Romanov dynasty from power through the Frankist Bolsheviks they controlled. Adolf Hitler was offered as the manufactured solution to the burden imposed upon Germany by the Treaty of Versailles. The event Hitler created to take control of Germany was engineered through a false flag attack. We now know that Hitler had his henchmen set fire to the German parliament, known as the Reichstag, in 1933. The fire was blamed on communist agent Marinus van der Lubbe in a huge show trial. In reality, van der Lubbe was a mentally handicapped individual picked up off the streets. Hitler's mighty war machine was funded and created by Wall Street. The Treaty of Versailles induced Germany to default on its debt. The Dawes Plan replaced the treaty after 5 years and allowed links to be made between American and German industry and finance. From the mid-1920s to the late 1930s, through the Bank of International Settlements, over $135 million was loaned to the German electrical, steel, and chemical industries from Wall Street. The profits on these loans were considerable. Without the technology for extracting petroleum from the German coal fields supplied by Rockefeller-owned Standard Oil of New Jersey, the Nazi war machine would have ran out of gas. One of the funders of the Nazi war machine was Prescott Bush, father and grandfather of 2 U.S. presidents. According to files from the U.S. National Archives, Prescott Bush was a partner in Brown Brothers Harriman. This was one of the corporations used by industrialist Fritz to move assets between America and Germany. Prescott Bush's assets in Union Banking Corporation were seized under the Trading with the Enemy Act in 1942, after America entered the war. The Bush family fortune was built in part from funding the very enemy that would kill over 400,000 American troops. The ideologies of the Nazis and the Communists were set against each other by the Illuminati financiers in a dialectical struggle. Both ideologies are flawed and use the same means to produce the same result. The Illuminati financiers chose to eliminate the Nazi movement and preserve communism for one very important reason. Hitler started to print money just like the Federal Reserve. At this point, all of Europe was tied up in war with itself. The problem and reaction stages of World War II would only be solved through America. America entered World War II based on the Pearl Harbor attack that was allowed to happen and deliberately made worse. The Japanese signals indicating the time, place, and resources to be used in the attack were remotely intercepted and sent to President Roosevelt. President Roosevelt chose not to relay the information to Pearl Harbor. America now had the excuse to attack Germany, even though Germany never attacked America. The madness of World War II accomplished several things for the Illuminati financiers. Profits could be generated by rebuilding Japan and using it to provide cheap labor to flood America with inexpensive goods. This would accelerate the long-term planned process of bringing down America, just as China is being used to help finish the job today. Communism was allowed to consume half of Europe in order to lock America and the Soviet Union in a new dialectical struggle and a new opportunity for profit. Most importantly, World War II paved the way to create the United Nations and the Nation of Israel. It must be noted that the top 4 players of World War II had ties to the occult. Hitler was deeply involved in the black arts. He joined a group focused on esoteric teachings called the Thule Society. This is where the logo for the Nazi Party came from. The occult foundation of Nazi philosophy was laid by Dietrich Eckart, not by Adolf Hitler. Joseph Stalin was involved in Freemasonry. Here we see him giving the same sign of the hidden hand, the same hand sign of Freemasons Napoleon and Solomon Rothschild. Franklin Roosevelt was a 32nd degree Mason. Winston Churchill was a member of 2 Masonic lodges, including a Druidic lodge. When you look at a photograph of the 3 main characters involved at the Yalta Conference in February 1945, keep in mind that all 3 were Freemasons. Political Zionism used and magnified the anti-Semitism of the Nazi movement to create Israel. As soon as Hitler took power in 1933, many Jews around the world boycotted German goods. The political Zionists in Palestine negotiated a secret deal with the devil. In return for the transfer of 60,000 Jews and $100 million to Palestine, political Zionists would halt the worldwide Jewish-led anti-Nazi boycott that threatened to topple the Hitler regime in its first year. Over 40 million Chinese died in a 25-year period under the dictatorship of Mao Zedong, yet all you probably know is the phrase 6 million Jews. If you question the scope and purpose of the Holocaust, you will be labeled a Holocaust denier. The Holocaust of the Jews has been ground into the public consciousness by the political Zionists who used and inflated its horror to justify their goal. Theodor Herzl's dream was realized when the flag he proposed, based on the Rothschild hexagram, flew over Israel in May 1948.
Researcher and filmmaker Leonard Ulrich made this movie here, and I'll link it in the description section below. But when I say these things, I mean, obviously I've done a lot of research on this, and the simple fact is whether or not Hitler was trying to destroy other factions of the Illuminati, that doesn't make him a good guy. This isn't one of them cases of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. No, it's a bunch of Sith Lords vying for power. Here's a video I made called the Ahnenerbe Society, the Vrill Society, founded by Mean Mr. Mustache, and they were all over the world trying to find occultic artifacts and whatnot. But then Caesar chimed in, and I ended up having this really good conversation with him, which is primarily what this video is about. He posted this picture here with a quote from Mean Mr. Mustache talking about a book by Edmund Paris called The Vatican Against Europe. Also, Hermann Rusching, if I'm pronouncing that right, the former National Socialist chief of the government of Danzig, which is also where the band Danzig gets their name from, if you've ever heard of them. But as such, the quote goes, "I have learnt most of all from the Jesuit order," and that's a 17-year training curriculum, by the way. "There has been nothing more imposing on earth than the hierarchical organization of the Catholic Church." They ended up trying to kill him 5 times during the war. Some say he was replaced with a clone. But anyway, in answer to Cesar's question, I says, yeah, the Jesuits are basically different head, same Hydra. You know, it's almost like the Catholic Church's version of Freemasons. Because up until recently, the Catholic Church, people in the Catholic Church weren't allowed to join Freemasonry. So, as I was saying to him here, you know, it's all about faction wars within the Illuminati. That's all it's ever been, is faction wars. Like if you look at this picture here, Bilderberg at the top, you know, and then you got the 322, all these different symbols, different organizations like UNESCO, the United Nations, you know, the CFR with the white horse, the Horseman of Death is their symbol, the Gnostic, Freemason scumbags, the Beast of Revelations, or at least the first Beast of Revelations. Like all these symbols aren't, you know, they're not coincidental. This isn't just some coincidence that you can just shake off as, you know, nothing more than a bunch of war-hungry nut jobs. No, this is a secret organizations going back to Babylon, and all of them vying for control, as I said before. So Caesar says, I thought the Jesuits were dangerous like the Rosicrucians. And I was like, yeah, they are. They're just as dangerous. They're all part and partial. It's all the same machine. And like this meme here, which I don't know if you'll be able to read it very well, but I'll just read it off. So at the top here, you got Satan, Lucifer, you know, Sophia, and then the Superior Order of Jesuits and the Jesuit Order, the Catholic Church, the Pharisees. They've been on the ball. They've been on this since the beginning. And then you got what's called the Illuminati, as it were, founded by Adam Weishaupt in 1776. But today, considered the Council of 13, the Bavarian Illuminati, founded by Weishaupt, the Council of 33rd Degree Freemasons and the Scottish Rite, which my grandpa was on, the Council of 13 and the 13 Satanic Illuminati Bloodlines. I would suggest checking out Fritz Springmeier's documentary about that. The B'nai B'rith, if I'm pronouncing that right, the Grand Orient Lodge in Asia, their version of Freemasonry, and then of course you got the Rothschild Zionists, which ties into the 13 Bloodlines, the northern tribes, the Danites, the what people call fake Jews, you know, the Synagogue of Satan, beware those who claim to be Jewish and are not. And then you got the banking cartels, the money groups, the Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the World Trade Organizations, the National Central Banks, the International Bank of Settlements, the World Conservation Bank, the multinational corporations, Exxon, Disney, all that, the Rockefeller Foundations, the Noble Foundations, Russell Trust, you know, all these different subgroups, international banking, Chase Manhattan, Douche Bank, you know, Bank of England, Goldman Sachs, all of that nonsense. All designed to control money. And then you got the secret society groups like the Freemasons, the Skull and Bones, the Grand Orient Lodge, the Grand Alpina Lodge, the Knights Templar, the Royal Order of Garter, the Priory of Sion, the Rosicrucians, the Thule Society, the Knights of Malta, which I'm pretty sure Trump was a part of. That's why the Pope had a little hissy fit and disbanded them when he became president. The Knights of Columbus, and then the P2 Lodge. And then under that is you got the education groups, the intelligence groups, the religious groups, and the political groups, like UNESCO, the World Peace Groups, the Planetary Congress, the World Federalist Association, the World Constitutional Parliamentary Association, environmental groups such as Greenpeace and WWF. You got Lucius Trust, also known as Lucifer Publishing. You got World Goodwill, World Union. You got Esalen Institute, if I'm pronouncing that right. Media establishment, all media, owned by the same Synagogue of Satan. And then in the Intelligence Group Committee section, you got the CIA, and in Canada, CSIS, and the RCMP, the FBI, also in America, the NSA, the KGB in Russia, Mossad in Israel, BND in Germany, DGSE in France, British Intelligence, MI6, MI5, the Communist Party, Interpol, Scotland Yard, Europol, the drug cartels, let's not forget them, going back to Giuseppe Mazzini and the founder of the Mafia, FEMA camps, which is it's a shadow government that's allowed to take over in the state of a national emergency. And then you got the Secret Service agencies of Pakistan and everything else from China to whatever. As far as religious groups, you got all the sectionalized institutional religions that are probably most definitely run by the Freemasons. I mean, most pastors, I would say at least 70% of pastors in influential churches around the world are Freemasons. And Freemasons, like I said, are really good at pretending to be Christian. So you got the World Council of Churches, those 50C13, whatever, tax-exempt churches that are on the payroll. The National Council of World Parliament of Religions, the New Age movements, esotericism, not to mention Helena Blavatsky and the Theosophical Society, the United Church, the Unitarian Universalist Church, the Baha'i, the Temple of Understanding, the Vatican, of course, the Black Pope, the current Jesuit Pope, Opus Dei, which is an extreme faction of Catholicism, the Roman Catholic Church, and no, I'm not saying individual Catholics are bad, but that institution at the highest levels, you know, Al-Qaeda and the whole modern Islam, which is weaponized, weaponized Islam, the Theosophical Society, Hamas, Hezbollah, and then I added in the Zionist Remfam cults posing as Jews. And then political groups, you got the national government leaders, you got the United Nations, you got Bilderberg, you got the Trilateral Commissions, you got the Council on Foreign Relations, you got the Aspen Institute, the Club of Rome, the Bohemian Grove, the European Union, NATO, OTAN, the Pilgrim Society, the Fabian Society, the Round Table, the Royal Institute of Affairs, the Institute of France, I can't pronounce that French word, European Royal Families. But like I says, onwards and upwards, as far as talking with Caesar here, he said that he heard Gary Wayne in a video say that the Rosicrucians are above the Masons and at the same level as the Jesuits. And I responded, well, yeah, the Rosicrucians, or the Knights of the Rosy Cross, they infiltrated and took over Freemasonry after the church killed Jacques de Molay. Like the Knights of Malta, the Knights of de Molay, the Knights Templar, Rosy Cross, etc., etc., etc. It's all different heads of the same Hydra. But obviously they answer up to certain bosses, right? And then he asked me about this movie Iron Sky, which has this overt Vrill YAH symbol here. And he says, do you think that Hitler can be or is a Nephilim pretending to be a human like the movie Iron Sky? Is he still alive in the Hollow Earth? Okay, well, first off, the Hollow Earth to me is Tartarus, but yeah, as far as the Vrill YAH and that symbol here, and his question about whether or not Hitler and other world leaders are actually Nephilim posing as humans, what some would refer to as the body snatcher thing, yeah, there's an argument for that most world leaders are taken over by Vrill, or they become Nephilim in some kind of 33rd level ritual with things like cloning, etc. Yeah, it's possible. And like I says, that movie Iron Sky is just covered in Vrill YAH symbolism. Now, this Robert Sphere guy, or whatever, if I'm pronouncing his name wrong, I don't know if he's a believer or if he's, a New Age occultist, but I just cited this picture because it had that symbol there. It's reversed, but it's there. So anyway, the conversation continued. He says, Robert Sphere is so into hyperbole, but he doesn't believe in flat Earth. Well, the whole notion of flat Earth is a different conversation altogether. But he seems to be doing a good job in some of his research. And it's like, yeah, well, obviously he's part of the problem in that sense. But I'm just citing the image, as I said before, because it has that Vrill YAH symbol on it. Yeah, I'm sure that's just a coincidence, right? So Caesar continues to ask, goes, yeah, I think he is about the Gnostic hyperbole. And he has given so many hints about the reptilian Rh negative bloodlines. But Dr. William Schnoebelen once said that angels are blonde and blue-eyed and all that, and when they fell, they became the reptilians. Yeah, and I tend to agree with Dr. Bill. As far as David Icke, he said that these royalty need to do sacrifices and drink human blood, yeah, and that to mix their genes so they can't be transformed, blah, blah, blah. Also, I heard that Hitler was scared of the alien gray lamb that Aleister Crowley summoned. And I said, in response to a couple different questions there, yeah, that was the same gray Aleister Crowley summoned and who dictated his book to him. And Aleister Crowley was a pedophile who enjoyed eating children, raping and eating children. But I continued on, say if they clone all these world leaders after they die and they start possessing them with old ones and Vrill parasites and whatnot, at what point do they stop being the human they were born as and live the rest of their lives as these Nephilim? The whole idea of the body snatchers. But as far as the fallen angels being blonde hair, blue-eyed, Dr. William Schnoebelen talks about how when they do rituals, drink blood, whatnot, they can appear beautiful in their angelic forms for a short period of time, which is how they seduce people. And what Hitler referred to as the Aryans or the Palladians versus the Anunnaki. But again, it's just the devil's house at war with itself, vying for control. So this whole notion of aliens, what aliens are just fallen powers. Caesar continues on, Dr. Schnoebelen said that the gray aliens are like mules or like drones, just clones. So I wonder why Hitler was so scared of this alien gray. To which I responded, well, from what I understand, the demon lamb that Aleister Crowley summoned, that entity controls the rest of these alien greys that came after. They could be better compared to, say, the Borg in Star Trek. Simple-minded, hive-minded, organic robotoid worker bees, Nephilim drones, under the telepathic control of that fallen power, which Hitler was apparently scared of. And then he asks, I wonder if cats are clones, because Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, Napoleon, many other Antichrist prototypes were afraid of cats. I never heard of that, but I have heard that the Egyptians worshipped cats as like gods. And I says it's hard to say. It would have had to have been something that was done after the flood in the Tower of Babel by Nimrod, who, by the way, the Freemasons consider their greatest 33rd. Because it says in the Bible that all the Nephilim and whatnot were destroyed in the flood. So, if cats, felines, were taken on the ark 2 by 2, there's obviously an uncorrupted version. But all my life growing up, I have heard people talk about that cats are just weird. So, Caesar continues on, there's a Sumerian legend that says the cat was cloned from the lion, but I think it's post-flood. There are many animals that I think have been genetically modified, such as the Damascus goat, which is what I think he meant to write there. It seems to have a man's face. And I says, I never really looked into the Damascus goat because I thought it was a fake out. I honestly don't know. I never really looked into that. But I continued on. Yeah, they're cloning lots of different animal-human hybrids and weird critters, especially in China. They started mixing monkey DNA and all sorts of nonsense. It's just an abomination. Like, our genetics were created by a creator, and they're not supposed to be tampered with. But, you know, people who have no footing in Scripture don't know that, and they think that they're honestly conquering death. So anyway, Caesar continues, have you seen the Jesse Ventura Conspiracy Channel, or Conspiracy Theory TV show? In this one video, apparently, he talks about, the Chimera Man, chimpanzee, the New World Order soldiers, and all that nonsense. And I was like, yeah, I've heard of stuff like that. I've seen most of those episodes. As far as that show specifically, I don't trust that Jesse Ventura as far as I could throw him. I think he's controlled opposition. He's also a staunch atheist. I've also heard his show was planned all along to push the alien agenda, that he's been at cloning centers with David Icke and Alex Jones, and their whole little rivalry is staged. As far as this topic of chimpanzees and humans and all that, yeah, they want to push the idea that the Anunnaki aliens, or the fallen powers, came here and made humans out of monkeys and evolved us with their science and created us to mine gold. That's the whole ancient astronaut nonsense created by 33rd level Freemason Zachariah Sitchin, with purposeful mistranslations, by the way. The Zeitgeist lie, also easy to debunk by the Torah codes, proving that all those sun gods are the rip-offs. Caesar continues, I think everybody on TV is already a government agent. It could be. But there are many testimonies that in Area 51 and Dulce, there are animal-human hybrids, fallen angels, aliens. Yeah, there's lots of people. I can't remember that one guy's name who had his fingers blown off by that energy weapon. But yeah, there's lots of people who've supposedly reported on that and ended up dead. As far as answering his question about TV, yeah, TV is bunk. I'll watch shows online for research, or I'll watch old shows, repeats, whatever, because I'm bored, whatever. But mostly I don't even watch TV anymore. I haven't owned a TV in 10 years. Like CIA's Operation Mockingbird, like what he's talking about, government agents infiltrating the media. William Casey, former director of the CIA, once said, "We'll know our disinformation program is complete when everything the American public believes is false." Oh, that's awesome. Thanks, guys. And then I also posted this picture, just something I saw before that I had added dialogue to, that these are not aliens from some other world. They're not little green men from Uranus. They're the B'nai Ha Elohim and their children serving that old serpent Asatan. And like the Anunnaki, the Nordics, Palladians, the Greys, the Tall Whites, the Reptilians, the Insectoids, they're just all Nephilim. They're not aliens. They're not other species. It's all nonsense to take you away from the biblical perspective, because if you don't know the biblical perspective, you can't stop it. You can't fight it. You're just helpless when the pit finally opens and whatever. But Caesar says, okay, so the History Channel, I guess that Ancient Aliens show, believe that black men are descendants from the Anunnaki. And I don't know specifically what he's talking about there. I can't stand that show, Ancient Aliens, and I'll give another citation in a minute debunking it. But I said, yeah, I've heard that nonsense that black people are descended from the Anunnaki and white people, Aryans, are descended from the Palladians. But I think, again, that's all the ancient alien nonsense propaganda started by Zecharia Sitchin. And then he asks, well, what's your opinion on the sect of black Israelites? I've heard many of them are Masons in CIA. Well, if they're Masons, they're Prince Hall. And I've heard that Prince Hall Freemasonry, black people in Freemasonry aren't allowed to go past the 3rd level. But yeah, I've heard that the whole black Hebrew Israelite movement thing is COINTELPRO shillery. And in my opinion, I could care less if Yahshua Jesus Christ, if his skin is white, black, green, brown, purple, blue, whatever, it doesn't matter. It just seems to me that this is all about us versus them. These powers that shouldn't be want, the black people to kill the white people, It's just to create a race war. It's all garbage in my opinion. Caesar continues on, yeah, that seems already on the agenda. Albert Pike says the Third World War will be between Jews and Islam. Curious that before the sect of black Israelites were on, it was all about Islam, but they changed their whole minds, their ideology. It's almost like, yeah, one thing wasn't working, so they created another COINTELPRO group, revolving around this Anunnaki lie, apparently. And then Caesar continues on, when the stars that are fallen angels begin to be released from the pit, I think they will deceive many. Yeah, the whole alien thing. The New Age sect has grown too much. Yeah, it's what's on the menu. That's it. It's what's on the menu. And like Bill Cooper says, when it comes time and they push their religion, if you refuse their new one world religion, they will kill you. And so be it. I could care less. I'll gladly die for Christ. He died for me. So at that point, I continue on answering him. Yeah, in the letters of Giuseppe Mazzini to Albert Pike, the leader of the Illuminati at the time, 33rd level Freemason, capo regime, the exact verbiage is something like, to foment the hatred between Christianity and Jew and Islam until they destroy Israel in themselves, and then the survivors will be left so disenfranchised that they will be willing to accept the cold doctrine of Lucifer. Something like that. And I continued on, and I think the whole Planet X, Nibiru smokescreen will play into that. When Satan falls, the TV is going to say that an asteroid hit, and when the Nephilim demons start pouring out of the pit, they're going to say it's aliens. Also, I do believe that the television will lie, and when the trumpets sound, spoken of in the book of Revelation, they'll claim it's like an alien spaceship entering our atmosphere. Caesar then found a quote from the Albert Pike guy, one of the most powerful Luciferians of all time, and would have been one of my grandpa's mentors. The Third World War must be fomented by taking advantage of the differences caused by the agentur of the Illuminati between the political Zionists and the leaders of the Islamic world. The war must be conducted in such a way that Islam and political Zionism mutually destroy each other. That's their plan. They planned all this out like in the 1800s, in the late 1800s. So I continued on, the whole New Age sect that you speak of, in modern times at least, grew out of the Zeitgeist propaganda through the Theosophical Society with Alice Bailey and Helena Blavatsky. And Zeitgeist is easily debunked by the Torah codes, which predate all of that nonsense, the whole Egyptian lie that the sun gods came first. And then Caesar continues on, it could be almost like the TV series V. And you look at Trump and Melinda, there is some programming there, some predictive programming. It's no doubt about it. But also there's the topic of Trump as the dove that will bring peace to the Middle East. That's what they're calling him, or they have been since the 80s, right? Caesar, I responded back to Caesar, the 3 world wars of Albert Prague. That's it, that's the thing, you know. All these 33rd level Freemasons are Satan's prags. So I also continued on, yeah, as far as the V thing with Trump, the reptilian thing, very, very much so. I could see that, you know, the whole idea of Trump and this photo shoot from the 80s, the dove that will bring peace to the Middle East, that's bonkers. Like, not a good prophecy to be a part of there, buddy. Caesar continues on, these Masons are the most, prideful institution, and that sin God must hate the most. I was like, yeah, the thing is that's really spooky is of the 5 million or so Freemasons worldwide today, like 95% of them are simply Blue Lodge 3rd level sissies, and they don't have a clue. But at the highest levels, the Black Lodge 33rd level worshipful masters like my grandpa, they're full-on Luciferian, blood-drinking psychopaths. To get that degree, you have to drink blood or wine from a human skull and swear to make war on Yahweh, God the Father in heaven, the God of the Bible. Yet if you try to tell that to your average 3rd level Mason, Blue Lodge sissy, they won't believe you, which is sad. But, you know, I pray for these guys, but you're worshiping strange flesh in the strangest ways. Like the disgusting things those Freemasons do. And then I continued on, but I'll have to talk to you later, man. I'm going to go veg. It's almost 11 p.m. on the West Coast here. And he chimes in before we call it a day. He says, obscure books. An obscure book called Baron Trump's Marvelous Underground Journey and the Last President, written by a 19th century author, may have predicted the rise of Donald Trump. Well, they're all actors playing their part. So, I mean, if the script was written hundreds of years ago, they cast it, you know, this century, right? As far as this whole rise and fall, that's interesting. I didn't know about that. And also, I've heard when he's wearing the blue tie, he's the clone, and when he's wearing the red tie, that's actually him. But yeah, also there's the topic of the FBI files that reveal Hitler faked his death. Chances are, one of two things, you know, he faked his death, lived out his life, and died. And then there's the other possibility that these world leaders are replaced by clones or Nephilim or old ones or whatever, like Caesar was saying above. But either way, there's proof that Hitler faked his death. And then he says, I think he went beyond the Antarctic ice wall, and entered into the Hollow Earth. And to me, I just think the Hollow Earth is Tartarus. And the DUMBs, deep underground military bases, are just new back doors they're making. That's what I think. But, yeah, as I says to him, as far as this topic of hiding out in Antarctica or whatever, yeah, as far as I know, there's Nazi flags still flying in Antarctica. That there's still a Nazi presence in Antarctica. And then Rob chimes in. Stalin, Hitler, Trotsky, creations of the Frankenstein variety. Yeah, Stalin, Hitler, Lenin, what's his name? The President Eisenhower at the time, Churchill, they're all 33rd level Freemasons. And he says, while they didn't live in a 5-mile radius of each other, both Hitler and Trotsky were attested to and have visited Café Central frequently, for it was one of the Vienna's prime coffee houses. But who knows, maybe at some point in January 1913, they were all at the same time. I would have to look into that, but I think they were all assets being used, much like Lenin to destabilize Russia and whatnot. He put in a few citations here, obviously, and I will have to say that I'd have to read this off, but let's see, what other famous figures would have lived in and around Vienna in 1913? There was an unsubstantiated anecdote that in 1917, when the Russian Revolution broke out, a fellow patron of the Central and officer of the Austrian army is to have said, and who is supposed to lead the revolution? Mr. Trotsky from Café Central. Oh, so the theory is that all this was cooked up there or whatever. Interesting, I'm not too sure, but to continue on with what Rob wrote, from an economic perspective, a lot was going on, and a number of important figures were there. Ludwig von Mises, Friedrich Hayek, Joseph Schumpeter, if I'm pronouncing that right, Friedrich von Weiser, Oscar Morgenstern, also game theory, and more. For anyone who recognizes those names, yes, this was why it was called the Austrian School. Interesting. I didn't know that. And we all know that Hitler was Austrian until he became a naturalized German citizen in 1932 so he could run for chancellor. And before enlisting in World War I, he was a failed painter, yeah, I've heard that before, trying to get into Vienna's Academy of Fine Arts, where Freud was for a short while in Paris under Jean-Martin Charcot, if I'm pronouncing that right. However, he returns to Vienna to set up his own clinic, which is originally hypnosis. However, in 1896, he abandons this for his own psychoanalysis or his own practice. Once back in Vienna, he pretty much stays there until 1939, where he escapes to Britain, as he is Jewish, where he dies of cancer of the jaw brought on by heavy smoking. I'm so glad I quit cigarettes. This question is the subject of the Florian Ilias, 1913, if I'm pronouncing that right. Year Before the Storm, 2012, English ed. 2013. Synopsis reads like, 1913 is an intimate vision of the world that is about to change forever. The stuffy conventions of the 19th century are receding into the past, and 1913 heralds a new age of unlimited possibility. Kafka falls in love, Louis Armstrong learns to play the trumpet, a young seamstress called Coco Chanel opens her first boutique, Charlie Chaplin signs his first movie contract, and new drugs like cocaine, also back then called Tokyo, usher in an age of decadence. Yet everywhere there is the premonition of ruin. The number 13 is omnipresent, and in London, Paris, and Vienna, artists take the omen and act as if there is no tomorrow. In a Munich lobby hotel, Rilke and Sigmund Freud discuss beauty and transscience. Proust sets up In Search of Lost Time, while Stravinsky celebrates the rite of spring with industrial cacophony, and an Austrian postcard painter by the name of Adolf Hitler sells his conventional cityscapes. For Archduke Franz Ferdinand, I had to do some digging. I knew he was the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, so he was bound to have been in Vienna at some point. However, I wanted to be sure he was there and that he was definitely there in 1913. According to William Cavendish, a sixth Duke of Portland's memoirs, Men, Women, and Things, in 1937, Franz Ferdinand visited King George V and Queen Mary, as well as the Cavendish and Duchesses in autumn of 1913, where Franz has a near-death experience while out shooting. One of the loaders fell down. This caused both barrels of the gun he was carrying to be discharged, the shot passing within a few feet of the Archduke and myself, says the author. I have often wondered whether the Great War might not have been averted, or at least postponed, had the Archduke met his death there and not in Sarajevo the following year. However, before the autumn of that year, Franz Ferdinand is mentioned to be in Vienna in Frederick Morton's Thunder at Twilight, Vienna, 1913-1914, written citation 2014. According to Morton, Stalin and Trotsky are also in Vienna at the same time, but like I says, I can't vouch for them. Morton's synopsis goes, Thunder at Twilight is a landmark historical vision drawing on hitherto untapped sources to illuminate 2 crucial years in the life of the extraordinary city of Vienna and in the life of the 20th century. It was during the Carnival of 1913 that a young Stalin, who also became a 33rd level Freemason later on, who came to Vienna on a mission that would launch him into the upper echelon of Russian revolutionaries. And it was here that he first collided with Trotsky. It was in Vienna that the failed artist Adolf Hitler kept daubing watercolors and spouting tirades at his fellow drifters in a flophouse. Here, Archduke Franz Ferdinand had a troubled audience with Emperor Franz Joseph. And soon after, the bullet that killed the Archduke would set the Great War in motion that would kill 10 million more, and later World War II. So yeah, that's interesting, Rob. I'm not too sure, but I'll have to look into that. But to end this video, obviously, the other clips I posted from the movie New World Order, Secret Societies, and Biblical Prophecy, this is all part and partial. This is all part and partial, and it's all part of the plan. So before you go and start romanticizing people like Hitler or any world leaders, even today like Trump, keep in mind that it's all part of the plan. You don't get into these high positions of power without being part of these secret societies. And it's as simple as that. So thanks for watching, and I'll just say peace out, baby.